Hello there, you're watching World 360 on CNN News 18. I'm Maha Siddiqui. Over the next half an hour, we'll take you through all the major international stories of the week. Our pivot, the war in Ukraine, rages on despite a barrage of West-led sanctions imposed against Russia. Now Russia also stands suspended from the UN Human Rights Council 2 years before its tenure was to end. India abstained in the vote to oust Russia from the UNHRC but condemned the Bucha killings. The world witnessed shocking images of atrocities emerging from a town northwest of Kyiv. What could this mean in the invasion of Ukraine, the isolation of Russia, and the pressure on India to change its position? That's going to be our focus, but before the deep dive, a look at the headlines. Russia suspended from the UN Human Rights Council. Images of shocking brutality emerged from Bucha as Russian forces withdraw from some key places in Ukraine. Imran Khan's fate hangs in the balance even as his party tries all delay tactics. Opposition asks the speaker to follow the Supreme Court order. India sends fuel and rice to support Sri Lanka. The country seeks an IMF bailout as the economic mess leads to public misery. In a significant move, the United Nations General Assembly has suspended Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. 93 countries voted in favor of revoking Russia's membership, while 24 voted against. India was one of the 58 who abstained from the vote. Amidst Moscow's warnings that abstention could be seen as an unfriendly gesture and could hurt bilateral ties. India's envoy to the United Nations, T.S. Tirumurti, reiterated the call for dialogue, diplomacy, and an immediate cessation of violence. This took place in the wake of videos and photos showing streets in the town of Bucha on the outskirts of the capital of Ukraine. Russia withdrew from the UNHRC after being suspended.
India has abstained on the resolution adopted in the General Assembly. We believe that no solution can be arrived at by shedding blood and at the cost of innocent lives. If India has chosen any side, it is the side of peace, and it is for an immediate end to violence. Recent reports of civilian killings in Bucha are deeply disturbing. We have unequivocally condemned these killings and support the call for an independent investigation.
The Bucha atrocities have left the world speechless. The Ukrainian president went to the town after the images emerged and said that the world needs to see the atrocities committed by Russia. But Russia denies the allegations, saying that they left Bucha on the 30th of March and the images came up 3 days later, and they have called it staged. CNN's Fred Plechin was in Bucha, and here's what he saw.
Well, it's certainly still, a very tough and devastating situation here on the ground in Bucha. What you have behind me is that mass grave, that we've been talking about. The local authorities here tell us they believe there's, 150, maybe more people that are buried in there. Of course, the mayor has been saying that he believes around 300 people are buried in mass graves here in Bucha. The big problem is they simply don't know, because as the fighting was going on, more and more people were getting buried here, and they simply lost track. And it's something, unfortunately, that we see in this entire district of Bucha as more and more bodies are being found. Here's what we witnessed. As Russian forces retreat from the area north of Kyiv, in their wake, scenes of utter destruction. Whole blocks of houses flattened, Ukrainian authorities saying they believe dead bodies are still lying underneath. But here, the dead also lay in the open. Ukrainian National Police showed us this mass grave in Bucha, saying they believed up to 150 civilians might be buried here, but no one knows the exact number. People killed while the Russian army occupied this town. This is what it looks like when the hope is crushed. Vladimir has been searching for his younger brother, Dmitry. Now he's convinced Dmitry lies here, even though he can't be 100% sure. The neighbor accompanying him with strong words for the Russians. Why do you hate us so much, she asks. Since the 1930s, you've been abusing Ukraine. You just want to destroy us. You want us gone. But we will be. Everything will be okay. I believe it. Video from Bucha shows bodies in the streets after Russian forces left the area. Some images even show bodies with hands tied behind their backs. The Russian Defense Ministry denies killing civilians and claims images of dead civilians are, quote, fake. But we met a family just returning to their house in Borodyanka, which they say was occupied by Russian soldiers. They show us the body of a dead man in civilian clothes they had found in the backyard. His hands and feet tied with severe bruises and a shell casing still laying nearby. Russia's military appears to have suffered heavy losses before being driven out of the area around Kiev. This column of armored vehicles in Bucha completely destroyed. The way the Ukrainians tell us is that the Russians were trying to go towards Kiev and they were then intercepted by Ukrainian drones, artillery, and also the Javelin anti-tank weapons. It's not clear how many Russians were killed here, but they say many were, and others fled the scene. A national police officer says the Russian troops were simply too arrogant. They thought they could drive on the streets and just go through, he says, that they would be greeted as though it's all right. Maybe they think it is normal to drive around looting, to destroy buildings, and to mock people, but our people didn't allow it. And now it appears all the Russians have withdrawn from here. Ukraine says it is now in full control of the entire region around Kiev. But it is only now that the full extent of the civilian suffering is truly coming to light. As you can imagine, the Ukrainian authorities extremely angry about all this. We've heard President Zelensky railing against the Russians, and the Ukrainians also launching an investigation into all of this. Obviously, they want to get to the bottom of how many civilians were killed here during the Russian occupation, and first and foremost, also how these people died.
Joining us now live from Lviv in Ukraine, Rafael Romo. Rafael, after the horrifying images from Bucha, Russia stands suspended from the UNHRC. Does Ukraine believe that it will prevent Russia from leaving a trail of death and destruction in other places that they may retreat from?
The way Ukraine sees this is more of a recognition by the world that Russia is on the wrong side of history and that most of the planet's democracies support Ukraine, even if it doesn't stop the attacks and the carnage. Indeed, the United Nations General Assembly has voted to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council during a meeting Thursday. The voting result was 93 in favor, 24 against, and 58 abstentions. In a draft of the resolution, the UNGA said the General Assembly would suspend the rights of membership in the Human Rights Council of a member of the council that commits gross and systematic violations of human rights. Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations, Sergei Kyslytsya, had previously called upon all United Nations member states to support the resolution suspending Russia from the Human Rights Council. Kyslytsya said Russia's actions in Ukraine would be equated to war crimes and crimes against humanity. At the same time, he noted that a vote to suspend the country from the Human Rights Council is a rare and extraordinary action. He said Russia's actions are beyond the pale.
Rafael, has Russia decided to withdraw from any other place in Ukraine? And while this retreat is happening, are we seeing the intensity of fighting increase, on the other hand, in the eastern part of Ukraine, that's the Donbas region?
Yes, there are new signs that the Russian assaults and attacks are accelerating in eastern Ukraine. Over the last couple of days, heavy fighting has been reported in the Donbas region. Also, a local official reported Ukraine's anti-air defenses shot down 3 cruise missiles Wednesday night in the city of Zaporizhia. Russian forces have now completely withdrawn from areas near Kyiv and Chernihiv, but that doesn't mean they won't return. That's according to an assessment made by a senior U.S. defense official who added that the purpose behind moving those troops is to reconsolidate and refit in Belarus and Russia. And even though Russian forces have bombed Mariupol indiscriminately for weeks now, the official pointed out that they're not yet in control of the southern port city. Altogether, Russia has launched more than 1,450 missiles against Ukraine since the invasion, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg agrees with the assessment by the U.S. He said that over the next few weeks, Russian forces are expected to resupply and reposition with the aim of launching a brutal new offensive in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. Back to you.
All right, Rafael Romo, many thanks for joining us with all those details. Let's now take a look at the kind of pressure that is being built on India. Remember, India has constantly been saying that it's taken a neutral position on the Ukraine crisis, and even though it has abstained on resolutions by the West, it has done so for a resolution that was pushed by Russia as well. But if you read the text or read in between the fine print, you'll realize that there has been tweaking of India's statements, especially in the United Nations, over this last 2 months. And we'll take you through some broad aspects of the tweaking that has been done. And remember, this is also ahead of the 2+2 meeting that is going to take place between India and the United States in Washington, D.C. on Monday. And this is the first 2+2 under the Biden administration. But talking about UN, first of all, on the 31st of January, when there was a resolution, we saw India abstained on that procedural vote to discuss the issue of Ukraine. That was the first time that the Ukraine issue came up in a big way in the United Nations Security Council, and India had abstained on that at that time. But look at the difference in the situation that emerged after the invasion, in fact, started in February by Russia. At that time, India abstained on a UNSC draft resolution on Ukraine, but along with that, India called for immediate cessation of violence. In fact, it underlined the fact that it is important that all aspects of diplomacy as well as dialogue are explored to bring the situation under control and to get conflict resolution. On the 25th of February, in that same statement, India also underlined that there was a need to honor sovereignty and territorial integrity. So without naming Russia, India made it a point that all member nations must honor integrity, territorial integrity and sovereignty, which was clearly targeted at Russia. Dialogue is the only answer to settling disputes. This is something that External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar also told Sergei Lavrov, his counterpart, a Russian counterpart, when he visited India a week ago, and they were sitting across the table. This message was communicated by India must return to the path of diplomacy. And then if we come to the 5th of April, India clearly condemned the Bucha killings. This condemnation word came in only at this stage, almost a month and a half later, supporting a call for an independent investigation. Again, something that was looked at differently from what India had been standing for so far. But this independent investigation is the one that India reiterated a call for when the vote on removing Russia from the UNHRC is also concerned. So clearly, this kind of change in the statement coming through as the invasion and as the images of brutality emerge from Ukraine. Meanwhile, ahead of that crucial 2+2 meeting, which I was talking about between the defense and the external affairs of foreign ministers of India and the United States, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has said that engaging in defense deals with Russia would not benefit India in the long run. Another pressure building by the U.S. on the Indian side. Listen in to exactly what he said.
We continue to work with them to ensure that they understand that it's not in their best. We believe that it's not in their best interest to continue to invest in Russian equipment. Our requirement going forward is that downscale the types of equipment that they're investing in, and look to invest more in the types of things that will make us continue to be compatible.
Let's now take a look at some of the other stories that are making headlines around the world.
The people of France are voting for the president in 2 rounds on April 10th and April 24th. Right-wing candidate Marine Le Pen is closing in on incumbent President Emmanuel Macron. She's appealing to voters on one of their primary concerns, the rising cost of living. A Turkish court has ruled that the Jamal Khashoggi murder trial can be moved to Saudi Arabia. It's a move that could end the nearly 4-year-old case, and Khashoggi's fiancée and her legal team are slated to appeal against the decision. Yemen's President Hadi has been replaced by a newly formed presidential council in a bid to support UN efforts to end the country's 7-year civil war. With this, hopes of peace are emerging in the war-torn nation. Shanghai's lockdown continues amid a surge in COVID cases across China. It's been over 12 days of the lockdown, and port delays are getting worse. There's also added pressure on global trade, and air transport costs are increasing. Ketanji Brown Jackson has been confirmed as the first black woman Supreme Court justice in the United States. The Senate voted 53-47 on Thursday to confirm Jackson, with a handful of Republicans walking out when it was seen that the vote was in her favor. US President Biden called the confirmation a moment of real change in American history.
Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan desperately is trying to evade a trust vote. His party members used delay tactics and many remained absent from the House proceedings on Saturday. The opposition claims the support of 176 MNAs and 21 rebel MNAs, which is more than enough to deliver the final blow to Imran Khan. Imran Khan is busy generating an anti-West sentiment as well, an issue that he hopes will help him ride public sentiment back in office if an election is held soon. Let me go across immediately to Mohit Jafri, who's joining us live from Pakistan. Mohit, what was the Supreme Court ruling, and how is that supposed to be executed in Parliament?
Well, the Supreme Court of Pakistan shocked everyone with a unanimous 5-0 decision. They outruled and outlawed the actions taken by the PTI Deputy Speaker, Mr. Qasim Suri. It was declared that his actions were unconstitutional, and they overstepped the jurisdiction that he basically has under the Constitution. And because of the fact that every other action that happened as a consequence of Mr. Suri's action of dismissing the vote of no confidence on the pretext that it was in collision or it was against the sovereignty and security of Pakistan, which was followed by Imran Khan dissolving the assemblies and resigning from his office once again. So what the Supreme Court did was they outlawed and they dismissed and rejected the actions of the Deputy Speaker, and they stated it to go to the void ab initio methodology, which basically means that everything goes back to the way it was before that action was taken. So the assemblies, the parliament was restored. Imran Khan is once again back in the Prime Minister's seat. And it's a very interesting and conflicting situation here, where when PTI is coming back into the government, PTI supporters and PTI leaders are upset, and the opposition is happy that the PTI government has been restored. So that is what the court decided. Also, the court went on to dictate very clearly, in very clear terms, what was going to happen in the future. They said that on Saturday, the session is going to start at 10:30 a.m. It is going to take up the business of vote of no confidence, and that is it. It is going to deliver that vote of no confidence in this session, and this session cannot be prorogued any further without appointing a prime minister through a vote of confidence within the same session. So the Supreme Court made it very clear that this session will ensure that the vote of no confidence goes through.
All right. Many thanks, Mohit, for joining us with all those details in a very complicated political situation in Pakistan. Let's move on now to another neighboring country of India. Sri Lanka's woes continue to worsen, with essentials in short supply. Food inflation is at an alarming 25% high and counting. And life-saving medicines are out of stock as well. News 18 is on ground zero, getting you the latest on the situation from Sri Lanka.
श्रीलंका में इस वक्त लोगों को काफी ज्यादा परेशानी हो रही है। आप दूध के लिए लाइन देख सकते हैं, ये फ्रेश मिल्क के लिए लाइन है, क्योंकि पहले यहाँ पर स्टॉक नहीं था और जैसे ही स्टॉक आया है, आप देखिए कितनी लंबी ये लाइन है। इन लोगों को 1 से 1.5 घंटा इंतजार करना पड़ रहा है दूध के लिए, और दूध के प्राइसेस भी काफी ज्यादा हाई हैं। आप समझिए कि 1 लीटर दूध लगभग आपको 1500 रुपए में मिलेगा। व्हाट्स द प्राइस ऑफ 1 लीटर ऑफ मिल्क?
1 liter, 400 gram is 625.
400 ग्राम में 625। तो आप अंदाजा लगाइए कि 400 ग्राम दूध 625 रुपए का है। अगर आप 1 लीटर खरीदते हैं तो लगभग 1500 रुपए आपको दूध के लिए चुकाने पड़ेंगे। और हाउ लॉन्ग यू आर वेटिंग हियर?
About 1 hour.
1 hour for fresh milk.
Fresh milk.
Prices are high.
Prices high. 625 one packet.
One packet. So prices are really high.
Yes, very high. We are thinking that it may go high again because now the dollar is 320 yesterday, the TV shows. So we are afraid that's why we came in.
तो इस वक्त एक बार फिर से मैं आपको तस्वीरें दिखा देती हूँ। आप देखिए यहाँ पर बहुत लंबी लाइन है, लोग काफी इंतजार कर रहे हैं और इस वक्त श्रीलंका के लोग अपने सबसे बुरे दिनों को देख रहे हैं। जो जीवन जीने के लिए, जो जिंदगी जीने के लिए मूलभूत सुविधाएं हैं वो उनको नहीं मिल रही है।
Apart from fuel shortage and massive power cuts, another impact of Sri Lankan economic crisis is the shortage of essential items. Right now we are in Sidavu area of Sri Lanka, 35 kilometers from Colombo, and in this supermarket you can see that how these shelves are empty. And this is not just one supermarket or one area. This is exactly how every other supermarket in this entire country looks like right now. We'll try and speak to some of the people here to understand what are the challenges they are facing and how are they managing everything here. Excuse me, ma'am. If I can understand from you that when it comes to shortage, whether it's especially essential items, whether it's medicine, milk powder, what is the condition in your area?
But this is our area, but no essential items to purchase. But we want to find, otherwise how to celebrate New Year?
So what are the items, essential items which are not available?
Especially milk powder, rice, sugar.
Rice, the outstation have, but Sadosa don't have. Outside, some place have, but Sadosa don't have.
And medicines, ma'am, I want to understand, is there a shortage of medicine here as well?
Yeah, government hospital, no medicine, but private pharmacies we can buy. Okay. Today I purchased medicine, but expensive.
Okay.
That's the terrible situation because of the economic mess that Sri Lanka is facing at the moment. Meanwhile, India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Gopal Bagle, shared details on exactly how India is helping support Sri Lanka in this time of crisis and what India is going to do in the long term to help the neighbor. Listen in.
The support that we have extended just now, which is since January, as you know, as GSXP and a spokesperson, Sharon Dambachi also mentioned in his briefing yesterday, is in the past 3 months since January, it's $2.5 billion. As far as the long-term cooperation and support is concerned, there are two aspects. One is the investment coming in from India, and as I mentioned, there is investment in pharmaceuticals, ports, infrastructure, renewable energy, both public sector and private sector in these areas. The other aspect is India's development cooperation, which for a number of years has focused on infrastructure, on housing, on creation of capacities in education, agriculture, railways, other modes of transport, information technology, training of personnel, etc. Dairying, fisheries. The development cooperation assistance from India in the past a decade or so, maybe 12, 15 years, amounts to another $3.5 billion.
Well, that's it then for today. See you again next week. Bye-bye.